Okay, welcome. Can everybody hear? Okay. Does everybody have their soup? So was it good? All right. So before I start, I just want to say thanks to a few people that helped put this together. Shelley, Jakey, and Marcia Kent and the McFarland marketing team helped put together the Facebook invite, and the Mary Greeley folks helped gave us the room and the food. And then Chef Chris, whom I don't know that well, he's not here, but he's the one that made the soup, and I think that that recipe can be made available through the same face page. So anyway, we'll get started. I'll start by saying that my name is Mike, and I eat meat, and this is Jake, and he eats meat. So that was my low-level humor, but a reference to AA when people stand up and kind of bare their soul. And the point is that we're not here as strict vegans, vegetarians, or plant-based eaters. At least I'm not. I'm just here as somebody that thinks this is a really, really important topic, and I'm convinced it's the healthiest way to eat. So we wanted to create just a forum where people could listen, and not just us lecturing, but hopefully have some discussion as we go along. So what's going to happen is I'm going to talk for a little while, and Dr. Alexander will talk, and then there'll be plenty of time for questions or discussion as we go along. So, oops, that one. Okay, so why are we here? So like I mentioned, neither of us have any special training in nutrition. We're not dietitians. We do have a medical degree and some background in biochemistry, but most importantly, we have a lot of experience, years in practice, me more than Jake, but we see people coming into the office all the time with chronic disease that's largely related to what they're eating and the wrong things that they're eating. So if we can try to make an impact upstream and prevent either the chronic disease from starting or help control it, use less medicine, that sort of thing, those are all goals. As I mentioned, we're both convinced that the plant-based whole food diet is the healthiest diet for everyone. And I just put this little statement: the food you eat is more important than the medicine your doctor prescribes, and I'm convinced of that, and I try to tell that to my patients. And there are certain chronic diseases that I see all the time. People come in for diabetes check, and there's a measurement we do, the A1C, that tells us how well their disease is controlled. And I know when I look at their record in my office before I go see them, if I see their weight's gone up, then I'm going to be talking to them about adding another medicine or trying to do something different. But if their weight's controlled or down, then we can talk more about fun things like new recipes, things like that. But anyway, it's really important that we focus on the food, not just the medicine. And I wanted to put this up there. This is not a McFarland Clinic diet. We're not representing all our colleagues, and like I say here, that I think if you surveyed my colleagues, they would have a wide viewpoint and not different from the general population. I see them in the doctor's lounge eating bacon and things like that. Okay, so what is a plant-based whole food diet? Well, I guess some of it's pretty straightforward. Plant-based means no animal products, no meat, dairy, eggs, and yes, no fish. So I'm a Catholic, and I always thought fish was not meat because in Lent we can't eat meat on Fridays, but we can eat fish. But obviously fish is not a plant. And my patients will frequently say they're vegetarian, they don't eat meat. When I ask them, what are you eating? Well, I have some fish and chicken. Like, what? At any rate, so no animal products. And then the whole food is a little, I think, a little more difficult to get your head around. It's basically food, natural form, not boxed, processed, refined. The processing process with grains takes away the husk, which contains important nutrients and fiber. Some examples then are the raw vegetables, cooked vegetables, whole fruit, not fruit juice. You need the pulp, which is not just, it contains fiber and nutrients, legumes, nuts. And I mentioned that this is hard to do. I mean, I eat some boxed cereal, need my all bran, some rice milk, things like that. So if you're going to do this all the way, it is a challenge, but can be done. Okay. So I just wanted to put just a brief thing about how I became interested in this. I had a patient who came to me about 7 years ago and said, "Dr. Bird, I want to lose weight, and this is the diet I want to eat, so I want you to read this book." So she gave me the book Eat to Live by Dr. Joel Fuhrman. And most of the time when I get this sort of stuff from patients, I just kind of glance at it and toss it aside. But this one caught my interest, and so I read the book, and this really made sense about the logic of eating plants, how it was basically better for health. At least to me, it struck a chord. So prior to this, I wasn't terribly overweight, but I was overweight, and I was going to have to get some new pants, and I was having heartburn every evening, taking a medication to control that. So when after I read the book, I stopped drinking milk, I stopped eating meat, quit eating most fried foods, and lost some weight, more energy, heartburn went away, and then I realized, well, boy, you really have a lot of control over your health, and it's not that hard to do. Just eat a little differently. And as I mentioned here, most importantly, my wife didn't leave me, which is, I mean, it brings up an important point. It's hard if you're the only one in the family doing this. It's really nice to have everybody on board because it is different. So I guess I'm officially a pescatarian. I eat fish. I don't eat fish because I think it's more healthy. I eat it because I'm sharing meals with my wife and mother-in-law, and they were nice enough to give up the meat for me. Don't fix any meals with meat other than fish. So we have fish a couple times a week, but anyway, that's my sort of approach. And I struggle every day. I mean, people bring food to the office, and it's never healthy stuff. You know, it's cake, it's donuts, and chocolate chip cookies, and I'll eat those every time, the chocolate chip cookies. So we all have to kind of, struggle through this. There's supposed to be some few jokes that I put on here that I was going to throw in just for fun, and I remember one of them. The question is, how many vegetarians does it take to screw in a light bulb? And the answer is, I don't know, but do they get enough protein? So that protein thing's a recurring theme. Do we get enough protein? Do we get enough protein? The answer is yes, we get enough protein. All right, so the next slide is going to offend a lot of people, or maybe most people, but I feel like it's kind of important that we just have a basic understanding of some simple nutritional things. So macronutrients, this is where we get all of our calories: protein, carbohydrates, fat. And the main thing here is that fat, gram for gram, pound for pound, that's more than twice as many calories as the other two nutrients. So the micronutrients, these are vitamins and minerals, things we need in small quantities for our health, a lot of normal body function. And then a little bit more about protein. So protein's made up of building blocks called amino acids, and there's 20 of them. And the issue here is that our body can make a lot of them, but 9 of them it can't make. These are the building blocks or the amino acids that we need to eat. And kind of the traditional teaching, what I was taught at school, is that you needed to eat foods that were complete protein meals that had all of these essential amino acids. Otherwise, your body wasn't able to make protein properly. But we know that's not true. Your body is an amazing machine. You just give it a variety of food, and it'll take care of it. and it's just reprocessing proteins all the time, breaking them, rebuilding them, and so you don't need to make sure that you're eating a hunk of meat that has all the essential amino acids. Let's see. Just a few more things. The phytochemicals are just thousands of different things. I labeled some of them here that are mainly in plants, phytoplant, and these things have a lot of properties. The antioxidant property is plays a role in disease prevention, cancer prevention, and of course found mainly in plants. Put this next piece of information because I see with the United States Department of Agriculture, their recommended percentages of these macronutrients. And so I made a point here that so even the government doesn't recommend a low-carb diet. A low-carb diet is this kind of recurring theme that I see from people in the office, and every time I sit down with a patient, they tell me, all right, I'm going to lose weight. So I ask them, well, what are you going to do? A low-carb diet. And they usually go, ah! No! And then I try to get more detail from them. So then they say, well, I'm not going to eat sugar, pasta, and bread. And I say, that's great. So what are you going to eat? Well, no restriction in meat and dairy. And that's where, for me, it kind of breaks down. But I just try to reinforce to them, okay, low carb's fine as long as you're eating the good carbs and kind of, tipping the scales. More of that, less meat, less dairy. All right, here's another joke. Anyway, how do you know if someone's a vegan? The answer is, don't worry, they'll tell you within the first 2 minutes of meeting them. That's true. We like to brag about our eating. This is a little more basic nutrition. So this comes from the Eat to Live book, Dr. Furman's nutrient density formula, where health equals nutrition divided by calories. And the simple thing here is, as the calories are high in meat, dairy products, and the nutrition value is low, basically it's protein and fat, then your H number goes down. I'll show you another slide here that kind of goes over some of this. So, oh good, shows up. So this is a table, the nutrient density table. So, let's see if I can get the pointer going. So we got the foods across the top. Got some steak there. And so the key here is that this is nutrient density. It's the amount of nutrients per 100 calories. Not per weight, but per 100 calories. So protein in broccoli, 11.2, 7.5 for the romaine, 11 for the kale, 5 for the steak. So that's the point there is, again, if you were doing it by grams, of course, by weight of the meat, then there would be more in the steak, but plants have more protein. How about that? Calcium also. And then go down to fiber, 4.7, 4, 3.4, steak, 0. So meat, dairy, animal products don't have fiber, which is a huge deal because as Americans we get about less than half of the fiber we need. Fiber is important for a lot of things with our health. It's not just a bulk item. It has a lot of properties, and so don't get that from eating meat. And then go down here, cholesterol, broccoli, 0, lettuce, 0, kale, 0, and then there's the steak. There is fat in plants, but not cholesterol. So that's the nutrient density. All right, so I'm just going to show a brief video, give myself a break. This is from nutritionfacts.org. I reference it at the end of my talk. It's a doctor by the name of Michael Greger, and he has a research team, and they research nutritional things about how plant-based eating is helpful in a lot of multiple ways. Anyway, so it's something I subscribe to. I get a little email each day with a little video or a blog, and it's, I think, pretty helpful. I don't see the button to make this go. I'll see if I can get it going. Might need some... Oh. So about to go. Should I go for it? I don't know what's happening here. Oh, here we go.
We know that vegetarians tend to be slimmer, but there's this perception that veg diets may be somehow deficient in nutrients. So how's this for a simple study? Let's just analyze the diets of 13,000 people and compare the nutrient intake of those eating meat to those eating meat-free diets. They found that those eating vegetarian were getting higher intakes of nearly every nutrient. More fiber, more vitamin A, more vitamin C, more vitamin E, more of the B vitamins, thiamine, riboflavin, folate, more calcium, magnesium, iron, potassium, while at the same time eating less of the harmful stuff like saturated fat and cholesterol. And yes, they got enough protein. And some of those nutrients, look, are the ones Americans really struggle to get enough of. Fiber, vitamins A, C, and E, calcium, magnesium, potassium. And those eating vegetarian got more of all of them. Even so, though, just because they did better than the standard American diet isn't saying much. They still didn't get as much as they should have. I mean, yes, those eating vegetarian ate significantly more dark green leafy vegetables, but that comes out to just 2 teaspoons of greens more. In terms of weight management, the vegetarians were consuming on average 363 fewer calories every day. That's like what people do when they go on a diet and restrict their food intake. But that seemed just like what vegetarians ate normally. So a vegetarian diet could be considered an all-you-care-to-eat version of a calorie-restricted weight loss diet, naturally inducing weight loss and also helping maintain healthy weight status long-term. So just following a vegetarian diet alone without focusing on calorie reduction could result in weight loss. How sustainable are more plant-based diets long-term? They are, in fact, among the only type of diets that have been shown to be sustainable long-term, perhaps because not only do people lose weight, but they often feel so much better. And there's no calorie counting or portion control. In fact, vegetarians may burn more calories in their sleep. Those eating more plant-based diets appear to have a 11% higher resting metabolic rate. Both vegetarians and vegans in this study just naturally seem to have a revved-up metabolism compared to those eating meat. Having said that, the vegetarian diet pattern in this study included eating eggs and dairy. So while they were significantly slimmer than those eating meat, they were still, on average, overweight. As we've seen before, the only dietary pattern associated with, on average, an ideal body weight was a strictly plant-based one. Still, this study does help dispel the myth that meat-free diets are somehow nutrient deficient. In fact, in response, the editor-in-chief of the Journal of the American Dietetic Association asked, what could be more nutrient-dense than a vegetarian diet?
So if you're interested, this nutritionfacts.org is a site you can subscribe to. It doesn't cost anything, and you get this little blog every day, and so it's kind of interesting. So we'll go on here. So I was going to... Oh. I think we're done there. They did this survey, and they created an atlas that would have the cancer deaths in individual provinces, and they would compare them. And they did a bunch of cancers. So basically what they found was that the cancer rate would vary a lot from one province to another, whereas in maybe the United States it might be twice as many colon cancers in Iowa as California or something. It was 10 to 100 times different from province to province. And they knew it couldn't just be genetics because most of the people in China had similar backgrounds, genetic background. So the researcher from Cornell was trying to sort out what's the difference, what's causing it. Is it the water? Is it the altitude they're living in? Whatever. But of course, his research was in nutrition, so his team went in and they took surveys of diet history from representative sample from each of these provinces. They checked blood cholesterol. They did all kinds of data collection, and then they sat down and looked at the data. So basically the upshot is that what they found in pretty much every case was that as the animal products in their diet went up, so did the incidence of cancers and other health issues like heart disease. So I made something about, let's see, well, skeptics. If you look at the internet and read about it, there's obviously people that discount the study because of how they looked at the statistics and how they collected data. And as Campbell said, this is not a, you can't prove anything. It's not a cause and effect. It's a correlation, but the correlation was pretty consistent. So there's a lot of other information. I think it's worthwhile reading if you have any interest in that more detail. Okay. So just a couple other simple things. Will you become iron deficient or vitamin deficient? And the simple answer is no. The iron issue is that meat has heme iron, which is better utilized by the body, but non-heme iron in plants is adequate and you get more of it. B12 is an animal product. You have to get this either with a supplement or from some sort of animal product. You can't get it from just eating plants. But you don't need that much, and you can take one multivitamin a day and get what you need of those crucial elements. I found one more little joke here, kind of. Tell someone you're a vegetarian, and suddenly they have a degree in nutrition. Okay, so I'm just kind of getting near the end of my part here. So what are the benefits of plant-based diet? Well, so we talked about the nutrient density. More volume, less calories, no cholesterol if you're eating all plants, much lower fat intake overall, more bulk and fiber, equal satiety. You get filled up sooner or easier, less calories. I threw in the constipation thing because this is a huge issue that we see all the time. We don't get enough fiber, and patients are coming in all the time with abdominal pain, and a lot of times this is the whole problem. It causes diverticulosis, can be a issue with hiatal hernia, so we need more fiber. Phytonutrients and the weight control, like the video said, you don't really need to count calories if you eat this sort of diet. And that's assuming that you control things like baked goods, candy, that sort of thing, which can easily sneak in there. And then the lower incidence of these major health problems. This you can find online. It's Dr. Furman's Nutritarian Food Pyramid. So obviously a lot different than the old food pyramid. And you know, we see at the base it's got the vegetables, fruits, legumes, seeds, nuts. Unfortunately for all of us, there are chocolates at the top. Rarely. Okay, so when I think about this when I'm talking to patients, it's a lot of times a little overwhelming to tell them, okay, don't eat any meat, dairy, eggs, all plants. That usually doesn't go over very well. And so I try to think of what's a starting point. And most people have trouble arguing with these 4 points: increased veggies, less meat, dairy, eggs, no fried foods, no desserts or candy, alcohol in moderation. That's still fairly stringent, but it's hard to argue that any of that's bad, I think. And the other thing is just a little, what we call a smart phrase within our electronic record that I can easily put in letters I send to patients. I just kind of summarize at least my thoughts. Sometimes I think they get scared away by that. All right, I think I'm down to almost one more slide. Oh, so if you can't read this, you probably can. There's a rhino, a big muscular rhino, and a lion, and the lion says, hey, where do you get your protein? And the rhino says, not this idiot again. So that's a recurring theme as anybody asks me about the vegetarian diet, says, well, how do you get your protein? You eat the plants, basically. Don't need that much protein. Okay, I think I have one slide left. Maybe. So a conclusion for me is that the plant-based whole food diet takes work and support, but the reward is great. We have tremendous control of our health. I think if you make a change, lose weight, feel better, need less medicine, you realize that you do have tremendous control over your health. You don't have to resign yourself to having a heart attack because your father did when he was 55. It's not mainly genetics, it's mainly the food you're eating. For most of us, it's a journey, ups and downs. And then I threw in this, let's start a plant-based whole food revolution in Ames. I jokingly say that to some patients periodically, but realistically, it's hard to go out to eat in Ames and get a meal at a restaurant that would fit plant-based whole food. And you can get a salad, a dry salad, which is not very filling. There's not many calories in your romaine lettuce. So maybe if we like to eat at the cafe, we can tell them, hey, why don't you put a couple of good plant-based whole food items on your menu. Probably not going to get Burger King to change, but some of the other restaurants might be worth a try. All right, so Jake's going to talk for a while and go from there.
That's going to be a hard show to follow. So anyhow, well, my name is Jacob Alexander, and I'm a nephrologist here at McFarland Clinic. And I'm going to take a little bit different approach to tell you more kind of my journey, because I have to be honest with you. Mike actually got me started on this a couple years ago, which I'll get into, and then I'll try and explain it through that, how I got to where I am in terms of eating more of a plant-based whole food diet. So first of all, I just want to take an opportunity to thank you all for giving me the opportunity to talk to you about a passion of mine. When I went to medical school, I really never imagined that I'd be talking today about nutrition. I thought I'd be talking about some new medication or some type of new therapy out there, but what I've learned is that diet is one of the most important things for your health. The phrase "you are what you eat" is very true. When I talk to patients these days, I really try and use the analogy of, when you're trying to fill up your car, you're trying to put the right fuel into your car. It's no different with the nutrition you put in your body. And I think a plant-based whole food diet is the right fuel for your body. Before I proceed any further, I just want to give a few disclaimers like Mike. I'm not a vegan, and I'm actually not 100% vegetarian. If you were to ask me what I am, I'm more of like a flexitarian. I eat other things besides. I eat probably 90% whole food plant-based diet, but about 10%, I'll eat dairy or meat or fish products. My goal is to get to 100%, but life has circumstances. You have family get-togethers, or you have parties, and so you do the best that you can. When I go to my parents' house, my mom makes amazing chicken curry. I just can't give it up yet. So anyhow, you'll all understand. Secondly, I'm not a dietitian, so I don't have the training to answer all your specific questions tonight, but Mike and I will try and do the best we can. Lastly, this is my journey. I'll just explain it. I'll just share it with you, and that's what I want to do. So where did I start with my journey of nutrition? I started in medical school over here at the University of Iowa. There I started to learn a little bit about nutrition, and we were told to encourage our patients to eat a healthy, balanced diet. We were shown the old food pyramid, as you can see here, but never really given a lot of specifics. We're told a person comes in with hypertension, well, tell them to eat less salt. A person has diabetes, oh, less sugar. high cholesterol, less fat. We were never really trained much on diet. In fact, Dr. Greger, who he showed you the video from, will tell you some of the people who know the least about diets are doctors. But we know how to use pharmaceuticals, and we know how to treat conditions with medications, but that's what we're trained to do. Now, I'm still a believer in using pharmaceuticals and allopathic medicine to take care of these conditions. But what I've come to learn over the last 5 to 10 years is that diet's a really powerful tool to treat these conditions, especially which, you know, some doctors or researchers, as Dr. Greger will say, is these are actually, for example, diabetes. It's a diet-associated disease in type 2 diabetes. You can actually treat it with diet, is what he would say. I definitely believe the first thing we should try and encourage our patients with some of these diet-associated diseases is to try and use diet. Sometimes, though, it's not enough, and then we have to consider using pharmaceuticals to try and help their patients. So, learning what I did in medical school, which wasn't very much, I ended up gaining a lot of weight. This was me actually when I was just before I came here to Ames. I was actually about 30 pounds actually heavier than where I am now. It was frustrating. About 5 or 10 years ago, I was like, you know what, I got to change something. You know, I need to try and do something better for my health. The strange thing was, I did the same thing that I think most people do. As I drank a Starbucks venti latte, I decided to myself, I need to go exercise. That's my problem. It's funny that 90% of my patients, when I mention, okay, we should try and work on your weight, the first thing they say is, yeah, doc, I'm going to go get that gym membership. And it's funny, I did the same thing. I thought the same thing, and I started exercising. I actually started exercising about 45 minutes every day. The strange thing was the weight didn't change that much, maybe a little bit. I also had high cholesterol at the time. But once again, before looking inside and saying, oh, this is a diet issue, I said, probably my genetics, and went on. I finally was able to lose some weight with my exercise program, but it actually, I needed some help. And I used, I don't know if this was an app that was out about 5 or 10 years, I don't know if it's still out there, it's called My Food Diary. But basically, it's a calorie restriction program. It helps you track your calories through the day, and it actually worked. You know, if I could really restrict my calories, I could lose weight with exercise. The hard part in all this was that it started made me think, you know, how could I do this long term? You know, I'd be tracking my calories every day, trying to get my calories burned more than calories in, and trying to lose weight. It was really complicated. So it made me start to wonder, you know, is there another way to approach this problem? And that kind of began my journey onto the trying to find the right type of diet. Learning about diets was a really fascinating process, and as you can see here, I tried a bunch of them. They're all right here. I bought a bunch of books, and I actually went and tried all of them, to be honest with you. I actually started with Atkins, which many of you have heard of, high protein, high fat, low carbohydrate. I couldn't stick with this too long. It just didn't have enough. I lost a lot of weight, and many people do right away, but then it just wasn't satisfying for me. It just didn't feel right either. Next, I went to gluten-free, actually. I don't know if any of you have read the book Wheat Belly. It's a book about how gluten in our diets cause a lot of chronic disease. I found it fascinating, and I did it for about 6 months, I'll be honest with you. But then I started thinking, wait a sec, you know, humans have been eating gluten for like centuries. I mean, it just didn't make enough sense to me. I then went on to try to be a vegan. As Mike said, sometimes it's hard to be a vegan. It takes a lot of work. So that only lasted about a month. Then I tried intermittent fasting. I don't know if any of you have heard of this. It's a unique diet. It basically requires 2 days out of the week you only eat 500 calories or less. And then the other 5 days of the week you can eat whatever you want. It actually works. Once again, it was the calorie restriction is really hard, and I think that's the one thing that kind of led me toward the plant-based, which is where I ended up, is that you're still restricting something, but in terms of calorie restriction, it's not there, and that really worked for me. As Mike had mentioned, this was not good for our marriage. My wife's here, and I'd be saying, "Oh, you know, honey, I think we need to try changing our diet again." And that was definitely saw a lot of eyes rolling, and so anyhow, I'm also thankful my wife has stuck through this with me. What I learned though through all these diets is that you learn that all diets offer benefits and negatives, and they all require some kind of restriction. In the end though, I felt a whole food plant-based diet, it was a better approach to lifestyle, and so that's why I wanted to share it with you. So what is a whole food plant-based diet? Mike kind of went over this, but basically one thing: plants. You eat plants. And it's funny, when I mention to a lot of patients, I'll give you a lot of these anecdotes from patients. I go, "What do you think about a whole food plant-based diet?" And they go, "Yeah, doc, I think I'm going to start eating salads." And salads are a part of a whole food plant-based diet, but I personally don't eat them too often because there's so much else out there. And that's what I've slowly discovered, is that there's actually a lot of different food out to eat. And as Mike had mentioned at the end, salads, unless you can add a lot to them to create a lot of calories, you can get really hungry. They're kind of low on calories. So anyhow, in general, plants, that's what you need. The most important thing is this is a high-carb diet, as Mike had mentioned, you know, and that seems kind of counterintuitive to what we hear in the media. But actually, our bodies were made to consume carbohydrates. It's partly the type of carbohydrates that we're eating, in my opinion. You need to eat the whole plant. You also need to try the least amount of processing is best. So as you get closer to the source of the plant and if it looks like a plant, what you have a plant, the healthier it's going to be for you. Quickly, this is just from one website that I pulled off. You want to eat a lot of vegetables. These include, you know, regular vegetables, which you think about with corn, greens, and so forth. They're the starchy vegetables, potatoes, and I actually are starting to eat a lot of legumes, which are beans. They're a great source of protein. Fruits are really important. I actually tell you, that's probably where I would tell you to start if you were starting to move this direction, just because they're so easy to incorporate. The other thing that's most important is to eat the whole plant. For example, like apples are something I enjoy a lot. Eating the outside of the apple is actually more important sometimes than eating the inside, because you get all the nutrients in the skin. Inside is mostly calories, in my opinion. Whole grains are an important part of a whole food plant-based diet, and I'll be honest with you, I've actually only understood this in the last year or so, and in my journey. And the reason why is we like to roast vegetables a lot for dinner, and we make it quite often and eat a lot of broccoli, cauliflower, carrots, those types of things. But interesting, I'd get hungry a little bit later, and I never understood that. Now what I've done in the last year is I've added more grains to my diet in the evenings, and we make some rice dishes, or rice that add with it, and it's amazing. It really fills me up and gives me a lot of energy, and I didn't really understand that, but I think when we look at civilization in general, we've been eating grains for centuries. It's just you have to find the grains you like and try and eat those. I think what happened, and the whole Wheat Belly book came about because what happened was, with industrialization, we started changing wheat. We wanted a product that could be transported or cooked into a lot of different things through the food industry, and that's what changed everything. And so you lose the nutrients when you start processing things like wheat. So I recommend you try and find whatever you eat with wheat, make sure it's whole wheat, because it will have a lot more nutrients in there. Nuts are also an important part of a whole food plant-based diet, and the only thing I'd tell you with nuts as a caveat that I've learned is that if you're trying to manage your weight, sometimes don't eat too much. Nuts have a lot of fat in them too. So I used to eat a lot of nuts a day. We used to buy these 2-pound things over at Sam's Club, but now I eat nuts, but not so much. If you're trying to manage your weight, what I've learned is that watch your oils and your fats a little bit. That's the only thing I would tell you there. The only things to minimize or avoid, as Mike said, I've learned, trying to minimize animal products, refined carbohydrates, and so forth. So how do you begin? Or how did I begin? I use this, these are actually a bunch of apples. I'll be honest with you. I actually started with apples. But ultimately, you need to figure out what works best for you. If you asked me like 5 or 6 years ago, do I eat any apples? I'd probably eat like one a week, maybe. I don't know. We'd have some sitting around the house. I now love apples, and I think that was where it started, or at least that's where I remember it. I actually probably eat 1, maybe 2 a day, and it's because it's really comfortable for me. I enjoy them. What happened was actually we started going to Sam's Club, and I'm not giving a plug for Sam's Club, but they had these apples there. They had these ones I've never even heard of. Like this was the one Ambrosia. It was kind of an interesting name. I was like, wow, should we try this? And it tasted really good. And then they had them all year round. They didn't have these all year round, but they had some other ones, such as I never heard of Envy. I don't know if you heard of these, but they're all amazing. And we would start buying these. And what happened was I started getting hooked on it. This was like a real comfortable food to eat, and I enjoyed it and eat it for snacks. And that's what I'm telling you to do. You don't need to eat apples. Although I do believe an apple a day keeps the doctor away, and I think that is true, but or 2. But I would tell you, find the food or the vegetable or the fruit that you enjoy and eat it, because you may not like what I eat. You need to find what you enjoy, but make sure it's a plant and eat a lot of it. The interesting thing that happened in our house was that my kids started eating it. In fact, as we started buying more apples, I'd actually cut them up in the morning, and I'll tell you what I eat later, but I'd cut the apple and just leave it out there. Funny, my kids would just walk by and pick it up and eat it, and it'd be all gone before they went to school. And now my oldest, he'll cut apples when he comes home. Your kids will start picking up on some of these things too if you have a family, and that they actually really like it. It actually makes them feel better than some of the other things they were eating. So anyhow, that was where it probably all started for me. So what else do I eat besides apples? So this is my story. You don't have to do what I do, but I'm just sharing with you. My breakfast, I actually have, I put here, usually I eat oatmeal, and I always think eating, I think it's crazy, but I eat raw oatmeal. I don't actually do anything with it except eat it with some fruit and some almond milk, and it's really filling and satisfying. In fact, it's become my new comfort food. If I have to eat something and I don't know what to eat, I'll eat oatmeal, and it's great. What I tell you is that 5 or 6 years ago, I used to eat toast a lot, and I would eat some type of carbohydrate, processed carbs, or cheese sticks. It's funny, now I'd much rather eat this, and it's become my comfort food. The important things, I think, with and for me at work at lunch, we usually have leftovers, which is some type of beans or rice or vegetables. And you can see here, I bring a lot of containers to work, but we'll have rice, which we made with vegetables on it. And anyhow, it's become something I really enjoy. I always take fruits to work. As Mike said, or carrots. I love eating those, and they're low calorie density, so you can eat a lot of it. I mean, that's actually the one advantage of a plant-based diet. You can eat a lot. There's actually no restriction with a lot of these things. And then for supper, I'm lucky to have an amazing wife who makes a lot of different things along with me. And we either have, probably our most favorite dish for our kids is roasted broccoli. We just put broccoli with, we put a tablespoon or 2 at most of olive oil, and then season it, just put it in the oven, and in 20 minutes it's ready. And our kids actually sometimes finish it before we even get to start. I mean, they love it. It's great. We've also made lots of bean dishes and so forth. Some things we found along the way is how to make your produce taste good when you roast it. We found, I don't know if ever you tried Mrs. Dash. When when I was growing up, we had Mrs. Dash, but there was just one bottle. It was, I think, this one right here in the front. But now they have like 12. As a person who deals a lot of hypertension, you want to treat hypertension with low sodium, and these have no sodium, and they make the foods taste great. So anyhow, that's what we do, but I would tell you to try it if you have a chance. I found that this type of diet has been very helpful for me in terms of lowering my cholesterol, help me manage my weight, giving me more energy, and so anyhow, that's why I want to share it with you. I've also found, as Mike was saying here, I was going to take it one step further, Mike. I actually think that fiber is something that is one of the most critical parts of this diet, and I actually would think maybe in the future we'll even think of fiber as a nutrient, you know, not just as, because right now it's considered a byproduct, you know, it's kind of, oh, you eat a plant, you get some fiber in there too, but I actually think it's a nutrient, and as you increase your nutrient intake of fiber, it helps you. Plants are our main source of fiber. As you saw, I don't know if you noticed this, but in that graph or that chart that Mike showed you, the animal products have zero. I mean, absolutely zero fiber in them. And once you start eating plant products, you start getting significant amounts of fiber. And it's actually been shown, you know, to, besides, you know, reduce constipation, it lowers your cholesterol. It'll lower the spikes of blood sugar when you eat fruits. And it also reduces the risk of certain cancers. So I think that's something I've learned through all this. I would tell you that the hardest part in all this is it's a struggle. I mean, I wouldn't say it's been in a smooth sailing course. No, it's been ups and downs, lots of different things. So what I want to tell you today that I would give you as a suggestion is I think it all starts with trying to make one change to increase maybe one fruit or one vegetable a day in your diet. Try and find out what is for you. You know, for me it was an apple, but you know, you might find something else that works for you and your family. But as you start finding something that you enjoy eating, you'll incorporate it, and then you'll eat it more, and that's good. And then hopefully you'll think of another one that you'll add in there. And through this process, now I eat mostly plants, and I would tell you 5 years ago I was not eating like this at all. As Mike said, I believe the human body is an amazing machine, and I think actually it thrives on a plant-based diet. In fact, I think that if you think about it, when you actually cut yourself, you never take a medicine to fix it. Your body actually knows what to do. I actually think when you feed it the right nutrients, it actually fixes whatever problems there's going on. And I think that with a plant-based diet, it can actually fix certain problems such as high blood pressure, high cholesterol, heart disease, diabetes, and so forth. The last thing I wanted to tell you was a couple things that have worked for me. I call them like little hacks for trying to try and lead a plant-based whole food diet. And I just have a few pictures here of a couple things. First of all, I think the most important thing is surround yourself with good choices. As Mike mentioned about, as Mike mentioned about the break room, my office is next to the break room, and so this is dangerous. If I forget the food in the morning, if I don't take food with me in the morning, and I get hungry in the middle of the day, which you do, everybody does. There's cookies, crackers, chips, chocolate. What do you grab? You go for what you have, and you eat something that is, you know, you eat what's there. But if you surround yourself with good choices throughout the day, it's easy. You just pick it. Or we have a lot of fruit at home. Our kids say, oh, there's some raspberries. I'm going to eat those instead because it makes me feel better. And so surround yourself with good choices. It makes all the difference. I think actually with a whole food plant-based diet in our culture requires a little bit of planning. This is not our refrigerator. I'll tell you that for sure. But I wanted to get here is it does require a little planning because it's not necessarily you may not have everything, well, depending on what you like to eat, but we like eating certain things like those rice and vegetables and stuff, and we have to plan a little bit ahead of time. But if you plan, you can find that you'll have the foods, and you'll learn how to make them, and they'll fill you up and they'll make you feel good. Two things that, and I have to say my wife helped me a lot with this, figuring this out, is there's been some few little tools that we found helpful, kitchen appliances, and these are things I'm not telling you need to get them, but I don't know if you heard the Instapot. We got one about 6-12 months ago, and then started cooking some grains more, and actually that worked really well. It only takes about 25-30 minutes, and it actually works for us. So I don't know if it'll work for you, but that's been a useful tool. And lastly, we like to cook a lot of roasted vegetables. We tried this air fryer, which is this thing in the corner. I can't get the cursor to work, but it actually is just like a convection oven, but it sits on your countertop, and you can make something really quick in that in like 25 minutes, which is really kind of nice. But these are some little things that have kind of worked for us as kind of little hacks to try and make things easier. Last thing, and I'll wrap this up, is start small. That's probably the most important thing. Make one change and then build on that with time. And that's all I have. I don't know if you have any questions. So. I think we were just going to open it up as if anybody had questions they wanted to ask Mike or I at this point. As I said, we're not experts in this, but at the same time, we'll try and do the best we can or give you our experience.
What about coffee?
I usually don't have it. I drink coffee every day, so yeah, I think coffee's great. So I would say the only thing is I try and cut down the like I used to drink a lot of lattes all the time. I've definitely changed that. I try and use less additives to it. I personally like soy milk a lot, but it doesn't mean you have to, but my wife likes some coconut milk. I mean, you can do whatever you'd like. If you want milk too, that's fine, but I'm always just saying, trying to minimize some of those things. I don't know, Mike, if you have anything else.
No, we're good. Coffee's good.
Yes. Questions? Can you repeat the question?
I can. Yes.
Yeah.
No, I both of us can say our own take on it. Sure.
Yeah. So as you said, yeah, vegetables, gas, and diarrhea. I mean, certainly, some people clearly have more trouble with vegetables, and so the experts would say, oh, if you eat it all the time, your body will get used to it. But to a certain degree, I don't know. I think you have to experiment, and there's probably some that are less bothersome, but I don't think there's any magic.
Yeah, I can tell you from my own, I totally understand where you're coming from too, but I think what happens is, or here's my own experience, I think what happens is your intestines start adjusting to what you eat. And so what happens is when you change, it becomes much more dramatic. So what happens, and this is Jacob Alexander's interpretation of the situation, but so your intestines are lined with bacteria, and they're used to whatever's fed them, okay? If you make a change and all of a sudden switch to another type of a diet, which is high fiber, they have to adjust. And so I don't doubt that, I say to yes, you will have looser bowel movements with a high fiber diet, plant-based diet, but you'll have to find the foods that work best for you. But I personally also think that actually indigestible plant fiber, part of the purpose of it is actually to make sure you have a healthy colon. And that's why I believe you actually see less problems in people who eat like diverticulosis, colon cancer, all these things, because you're actually eating healthy foods that are feeding that part of your body. I don't know if that makes sense to a lot of people, but that's what I think. But yes, that is not uncommon. And then you'll notice also if you eat a plant-based diet and then you go the other direction, you might have, meaning you start eating a lot more animal fats, you might have similar problems too. And I think it's because your body gets used to what you're eating. Your body adapts, which is it's trying to adapt.
Tofu, is that a good source? Good?
Mike,
Yes, okay.
I don't eat much, but Mike does that, so I
used to hate it, and it's all about how you fix it. But yeah, I think it's a good source of protein, and that takes on the flavor of what you're seasoning. So yeah, I don't think there's anything wrong with tofu.
I don't think there's anything wrong, yeah. I just don't eat it too much.
I'm way on the other side.
Yes?
Question was, what about digestive enzymes and adding those in?
I don't know enough to tell you enough about that.
Yeah.
I don't know enough to tell you that it's necessary. But
you shouldn't have to unless you have a specific pancreatic problem. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Oh, in terms of...
Would it help?
Yeah, I don't know enough personally to give you some more advice on that. I think, yeah, I couldn't tell you. I think most of since they're carbohydrates, I think they should get digested, but I couldn't tell you more.
The microphone. What about like the fake cheese and there's like the
for vegan.
Things like that, like the substitutes. Is it better to just completely eliminate those and get used to it, or are those okay in moderation? I don't know. They're kind of the fake food type thing. So I don't know.
I don't know. I never eat the stuff.
Is that you mean like the vegan cheese or stuff like that? Oh, yeah. I don't actually eat a lot of that, so I can't really give you a lot of good advice on it.
And that's going to be hard for me.
Yeah.
That's going to be an issue.
Cheese is a problem for a lot of people.
Yeah.
They really like cheese.
Yes.
At the beginning, maybe I missed it, but okay, yeah, I'll get that too. Maybe I missed it at the beginning there, but you had mentioned that there was 20 different amino acids, and that there was 9 that were missing from the. What did you say?
Body can't make. You have to eat them.
That's right.
Right. So is that made up from? I mean, the differences comes from the plants then, or is that another animal byproduct at all?
You can get them from plants.
Yeah.
You can get them all from plants.
Plants or animals.
Yes.
I mean, that's the one thing that I initially, when I was looking at this stuff, said, okay, what's the deal? They're all made out of plant protein, animal proteins, all made out of 20 amino acids. What's the difference when you break it down? Well, animal protein has a lot more of the sulfur-containing amino acids, creates an acidic environment in the body. Dr. Alexander would tell you more about the effects on the kidney and things like that, but it's pretty complex. But there's a difference between plant protein.
But you can get all the protein you need. I always think the key is you just have to eat more. And if you want to eat, if you want to get more muscle, you got to actually probably just eat more, because the protein density is less, just like the calorie density is less. But gosh, it's hard to. That's one thing about the plant diet. It's like you get to eat more. You don't have to restrict at all, because the calorie density and the protein density is lower. I always think it's amazing. You see like that rhino or a horse. They're just such powerful animals. They just eat plants all day. They don't eat meat at all. And it's partly their genetics too, but at the same time, it's amazing how you can get that much protein, but they're eating all day long. And large volumes of plant-based products, and they get really muscular. It's kind of fascinating.
So no dairy at all. How do you maintain your calcium, especially as a postmenopausal woman? Everybody's telling us, get more calcium, drink more milk, have some cheese.
That's really very good question.
No, it's
and I don't.
I like cottage cheese.
I'm sorry. A very good question, and we can both answer it. And I think that, as Mike had mentioned, if you look at actually the nutrient density of a lot of these foods, plant foods, they're very high in calcium. And then this can get a little controversial. Some people suggest that maybe our issues with osteoporosis, for example, is actually because we eat too much protein. And I'll try and break it down. I'll just try and say one thought on this is this. We as humans eat acid. I don't know. As a nephrologist, I know this because the kidneys are the only thing that neutralize it. But we eat acid. And we mentioned amino acids. We talked about. And everything has amino acids, whether it's your plants or your animals. but your highest concentration of amino acids comes from animal products. And when you get a lot of acid in your body, that actually leaches your bones a little bit. So some people would say less animal products are better for your bone health, if that makes sense. But I think that in general, you can get a lot of calcium from plants. You can always get additional calcium from supplements as well. But I think my personal opinion is that I think that the milk industry has really tried to encourage us to think that we have to drink our milk to get our calcium, but we can get our calcium from a lot of different sources, and maybe some of the plant sources may be healthier for our bones in the long term because it actually lowers the amount of acid we eat. And I don't know if that makes sense, Mike.
Yeah, if you look at read the China study, there was a specific chapter in there about osteoporosis and how some of the provinces in China where they had very little dairy, milk, and more plants, they had least amount of osteoporosis, and it goes to what Jacob was saying, the animal protein and what it does to the bone. But I think it's really hard in our society where you're combining things. I mean, you got to go, if you want to take the approach that the plant-based diet's going to help you, you got to do it all the way. Otherwise you're going to get the same position. Animal protein, more acidic environment, more calcium leaching. But it's hard because I used to tell patients, women, drink milk, eat yogurt, and I don't tell them that anymore, but I don't have a great, it's hard to try to explain it.
Yeah, Alan.
Typically, sort of like for me or other people you've worked with, for a person who has kidney failure on dialysis, is this an acceptable diet? Can you get all the nutrition you need through this?
So it gets very complicated. Thank you, Alan. I know Alan. It gets very complicated once you have advanced organ disease and that's because a lot of the vegetables and the fruits are going to be very high in potassium, for example. You have to then tailor the diet a little bit more to someone with a certain organ system problem, whether it's kidney issues or heart issues or so forth. But in general, the question is very difficult to say, but you would definitely need to tailor the diet because this is going to be a very high potassium diet. And in patients with kidney failure, that's not compatible with life. But you can actually still eat a lot of things that are non-high potassium. It's just you got to figure those out, and that would be some of the grains can be something you can eat, legumes and stuff like that, and certain fruits and vegetables you can eat. But if you have advanced organ disease, you need to talk to a dietitian and your physician to help make the right decision there.
He's no longer on Coumadin, but we were just talking about that, how that would really affect, a patient who had that, which if they're on it, they're going to be aware of that, I'm sure. But it seems like your goal is to get away from some of those meds, maybe. So if you start tailoring and altering, like he's no longer on that, you know what I'm saying? Maybe you can get away from certain meds, not without doctor's advice, but you know what I'm saying, with that supervision, starting this diet and then altering and changing maybe. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, no, I don't know if you want to talk, Mike, or I can.
I guess I didn't get it. Were you talking about avoiding, concern about taking Coumadin and then eating plants, too many plants, or no? I didn't.
Well, we know when he was on it for a very short time, there was certain plants, for example, kale is a real high K product that you can't have you have to be careful about consuming when you're on Coumadin. But I guess what I'm saying is if you alter, you can still have this plant-based diet and alter, be selective about what you're eating. Maybe eventually you'll go off certain medicines and you'll be able to consume additional items.
Yep.
I'm from India and raised in on a plant-based diet, and to answer your question, maybe it might help. my grandma used to cook certain food certain way, and I came here and I was like, oh, grandma, no, she didn't do anything. I'll just change my diet. And I could see it was not helpful when there was a certain way to cook the food with certain spices and certain vegetable you have to cook it or stir fry or something, particularly ginger. If you add a little bit, that helps. There is a acetophoria, there is a cumin, there is a other like oregano or carom seed, so you can digest the food much better. And even with the certain legumes and grains, we are supposed, at least my culture, we are supposed to cook with certain spices only. And then you can easily learn, your gut can learn to adjust with the diet change.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for the advice.
She's got a follow-up question.
Oh, yeah. No, good question.
More expensive than regular. And the other question is, my husband and I are big bicyclists, and we will go out and ride 60 miles some days. And I've got a little fanny pack, and I'll cut up an apple, but that doesn't last me the whole day. So what are good things to throw in that fanny pack when I'm gone most of the day?
Nuts.
To get, because you stop at a bar and they've got fried food, they've got burgers, you know, bar food. So what would I look for energy while I'm out riding all day?
I mean, certainly nuts.
Yeah, nuts are high energy. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I'm glad you brought up that point about organic. And, you know, you can, so my personal, we don't buy a lot of organic personally. I think the key, in my hope with a whole food plant-based diet, is that the best thing is to move from non-plant-based diet to a plant-based diet. And I think you get the most benefits to your health doing that. There may be some additional benefits if you're going to go organic, but I think the additional gain you get is relatively small. I don't know if that makes sense. And I know that this guy Gregor has done a couple reviews of articles and stuff. You may get some more pure food, but at the same time, I think the biggest benefit is just going to plants. Just eat the plant. I was going to say one other thing, but I can't think of anything else. But yeah, I like Mike's idea of nuts.
Nuts, dried fruit.
I just had a question about vegetables, and it comes from when I had an ill sister, and she met with a nutritionist from the McFarland Clinic who felt that you should not eat fruits that are not in season, and had a whole nutritional concern about that, and I just wondered if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, no. Actually, that gets me to the next point, which I just realized we were going to talk about, was that I don't have any concerns with it in season or not. In fact, what I say is the problem with organic, for example, is the cost. And one thing that many people will say is, oh, I can't eat fruits, they're too expensive. And going along your lines, you can get frozen, and that's always in season, technically 24/7, and 365. It's just because they pick it at the right time, and so you're going to get that. And if you eat frozen, for example, you're going to cut down your cost. Generally, they're going to be cheaper. But I don't know that you have to eat in season per se. I think that you could eat.
I remember it was one of them she was talking about was like the berries and avocados, because avocados are picked before they're ripe for shipping everywhere. And
I don't know. I honestly put frozen berries on my cereal in the morning sometimes when we don't have apples, and it's it's a lot cheaper per ounce sometimes, and I use them a lot.
Take a couple more questions.
Hi, this is kind of an observation, maybe a question. I was thinking about this, about the plant-based diets and about getting rid of meat and dairy. But in our food system, we've also done to our animals what we have done to ourselves, which is most of the products that you buy are from animals that are not eating plant-based diets. They're eating a lot of other things. And there is some research out there that does show that that makes a different nutritional profile in the meat and muscle products and in the dairy products that come. So for animals, it is what they eat. And so I think there's maybe, I don't know if I haven't looked at the Furman research. I don't know what it was based on, but it's a complicated question that moves through the whole food system, and I don't know if you've done any research on how what the animals eat changes the profile of what we're eating from them.
I have not.
I have not. No, I can't really say much. Sorry. It makes sense. It's just like us. Yeah, we're just an animal.
One more question for the evening? Right here.
I was just curious if either of you take supplements besides now that you're on the diet and you're doing well with it. Do you think there's anything besides the is it just
B12.
vitamin B12, or is there anything else as you're transition? Nothing. So if you're eating well, and there's no labs that if you're transitioning to a plant-based that you need to follow with your physician as far as
I think no in general. I've had some people come in that I think that they've just been too restrictive and they are anemic or their hair is falling out, but they're just not eating a big enough variety
as long as you're
plants.
eating well and eating enough. There's really nothing you especially have to follow.
The only things I say is that, if you're taking medication, you should talk to your provider about how you should adjust your medications if you make a change in your diet, because when we're prescribing something, we're assuming that's your diet staying the same.
Right.
So that's the only thing I would say. And you may need some closer follow-up if you're taking medications. But otherwise, I honestly think you start eating these diets and your body kind of fixes itself.
Right.
Which is, geez, that seems pretty straightforward.
Thank you.
Great. Well, a round of applause for our physicians tonight and sharing their journeys. Thank you, Dr. Bird. Thank you, Dr. Alexander. I'm Shelley Jakey. I'm the marketing director. We would love for you to be able to provide some feedback to us. We have some specific questions. We're interested in hearing what other health topics you're interested in, cooking demonstrations, perhaps a weight loss clinic, and the ways that you might like to hear from us, either as McFarland Clinic or Mary Greeley, in regards to these topics. Plenty of room on the back, too, if there's something on your mind that you would like to share with us, feedback in regards to this forum tonight or things that we should consider going forward. Please take the time to jot that down. Again, we appreciate your attendance here tonight, and thank you. Have a safe trip back home.